Hey out there, YouTube. So I got a request from one of my videos to do a top 5 baits for winter time. Subscriber was having some issues, having some trouble with his normal baits, so he wanted me to go over what I use for the winter time. But instead of doing a top 5, kind of like everybody else does, last night I rigged up my poles to go fishing. If not this weekend, I'll probably go next weekend. But I went ahead and rigged up my poles as if I'm going this weekend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all what I'm taking with me. The water temperature here in Virginia Beach is, last time I was out, it was 50 degrees. It's been relatively cool, so it should be right around 50 degrees still, if not a little colder. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what I would use as right now and what I would use as the temperature gets down to the 45, 40 degree range. So stay tuned and we'll get to it. All right, the first bait we are going to go over is, as some of you have seen my previous videos, it's by far probably my favorite bait. It's a bait that I usually have tied on all year round. It's a bait that I think everybody should have, if not tied on, readily accessible. And that is the spinnerbait. My spinnerbait of choice is a War Eagle spinnerbait. I'm fishing this on a 7-foot medium action Halo Fishing Starlight Series rod. I have 3 of these rods. These are my go-to casting rods, I guess you could say. I love these rods. They're really strong. They're got a lot of great action. I can cast really accurate with them. So, like I said, my go-to spinnerbait is a War Eagle spinnerbait. I will put the links for all the baits that I talk about today in the description. All of them can be found on Tackle Warehouse. That's usually where I get all my tackle from. So I'll put all those links down there at the end of in the description. So War Eagle spinnerbait, like I said, the temperature right now is around 50 degrees. So when it's around 50 degrees, I'm going to stick with your Willow Leaf Colorado combination. There's still some shad around. So the shad haven't all died off. The water hasn't gotten cold enough for that. So I'm going to stick with that Willow Leaf blade. Once the water gets down into that 45 degree range, that's when I'm going to go with the double Colorado or an Indiana Colorado combination. See that? This is another War Eagle spinnerbait. That's once the water gets a little colder. Fish are a little more sluggish. They need that little more vibration to maybe entice them to bite. Once that water gets down past in between 40 and 45, I'm either going to go to a single Colorado, spinnerbait, or I'm going to go back to a chatterbait, which is also one of my favorite baits. This is just a Z-Man chatterbait, typical original Z-Man chatterbait. That's by far my favorite chatterbait. As far as the trailers for the chatterbait, since we're on that subject, for a long time I fished one specific trailer, and that is your standard Yamamoto Swim Senko. It's the 5-inch. I like the 5-inch because I can bite about an inch off and get a 4-inch trailer out of it. The 3-inch is just a little too small for my liking. I like the 4-inch, especially during the warmer months. But now Tackle Warehouse now has these by Gary Yamamoto, because they're called the Zako swim bait. They make a great little chatterbait trailer. It's got a segmented tail. As you can see, it's got a ton of action. But when it's in the water, it's got a little bit different action than the Swim Senko. The Swim Senko has the big, wide wobble. This one has a little bit more of a tighter wobble, which is good for the winter months. That pretty much covers it for the spinnerbaits. So, like I said, I use War Eagle spinnerbaits almost 100% of the time. I just love the War Eagle spinnerbaits, mainly because they have, they're durable. The skirts are really durable, and they have the wire tie around the skirt so that it doesn't slip off. If you go back and look at my spinnerbait, chatterbait modification videos, I give an up-close view of the War Eagle, and I also show you how I modify other brands of spinnerbaits and put that little wire tie on there. So that's something to go check out if you're interested. But that covers it for spinnerbaits and chatterbaits, I guess you could say. Those are some of my favorite baits pretty much all year round. But wintertime, definitely slow rolling the spinnerbaits in deep water, or if you get a warm front or a warm day or you're fishing some riprap, you can also burn that spinnerbait up towards the top of the water column. So that's why a spinnerbait's one of my favorites. You can fish it from top to bottom. Next up will be a lipless crankbait. This one is Strike King Red Eye Shad in gizzard shad color. That's what I'm going to be throwing next time I go out. The lake I'm going to is full of gizzard shad, so that should be good to go. Now, like I said again, this is with the water temperature at that 50-degree range. If I show up and it is between 45 and 50, you know, right around that 47, 48-degree range, I will switch over to a jerkbait. This is just your standard Strike King jerkbait. I have others, but I will switch over to a jerkbait once that water falls below that 50 and on down to the 40-degree range. I mean, pretty much all winter, even if it goes below 40, which if it does that, I'm usually not fishing. But 40 to 50-degree range, I'm going to switch to the jerkbait. If it's 50 and above, between 50 and 60, I'm going to stay with that lipless. That's pretty cut and dry. I use predominantly Strike King Red Eye Shads between the regular Red Eye Shad and the Tungsten 2-tap Red Eye Shad. I have both. I use both at different times. I like the regular Red Eye Shad more in the spring, and I like the Tungsten 2-tap in the winter because it's not quite as loud and as intimidating for those fish that are a little bit sluggish. All right, the next thing I have tied on here is a square bill crankbait. The last three, the spinnerbait, the lipless, and the square bill, are all going to be thrown on the same rod that I talked about, that 7-foot medium action, what is it, Halo Starlight Series rod. So this square bill crankbait, this happens to be a Storm Arashi 3. The max depth on this one is 3 feet. The lakes around my area really don't get much deeper than around 8 feet. I have access to deeper water, but the main lakes that I fish around here don't really get much deeper than 8 feet. So with the square bills, I'm either going to be throwing a 3-foot. Well, this one is the Storm Arashi 3, or I'll throw like this Strike King. This one dives between 1 and 3 feet, so you're going to be able to fish this in a lot shallower water. This is a Strike King square bill. I think it's a 1.5, shallow running 1.5. Then you got your other standard Strike King 1.5 with the regular bill. And then if I'm in a little bit deeper water, like I said, it gets up to around 8 feet, I'll throw the Storm Arashi 5. This obviously dives down to 5 feet deep. Or again, the little bit deeper diving KVD 1.5. That's predominantly for the 50-degree range. Once I get down below that 50-degree range, if I'm throwing a square bill at all, it will be a Spro Little John. And the reason I like these Spro Little Johns is because, if you can see, they are a flat-sided crankbait. They have a lot tighter wobble than these round, I guess you could call them round crankbaits. So these have a lot tighter wobble, create a little bit more vibration, not quite as loud. These have 2 tungsten rattles in them, so I don't know if you can hear that or not, but they're not quite as loud as your Arashi. So a little less intimidating for those sluggish, cold fish. But these are the ones that I like in the colder weather if I'm throwing a square bill at all. But 45 to 50, I'm going to throw this. 50 and above, I'm going to throw your regular square bill. I believe that covers it for square bills. I have a ton of different kinds of square bills. I'll put a link for a couple different kinds that I prefer. I prefer the Little Johns, the Arashis, or the KVDs. but I have several different others. You know, we all collect tackle, but those are my main ones. So that pretty much covers it for square bills. And we will move on to, let's see, we'll move on to the easy one. We'll move on to jigs. All right, so jigs are pretty much a staple throughout the country. Pretty much everywhere you go, you can throw a jig and catch a fish. Wintertime, I have two different jigs tied on, and they're actually the same jig, but I make them into two separate presentations. I'm throwing these. This one right here is my larger profile jig. As you can see, I have not trimmed the skirt at all, and I have a little bit larger trailer. The trailer I was using for the larger profile is your Reaction Innovations Sweet Beaver. These are great trailers. The legs don't have a lot of action, so when that water's cold, these are great. If the water's a little warmer or the fish aren't relating to the trailer that doesn't have a lot of action, I'll switch over to your Zoom Z-Crawl or the Strike King Structure Bug. Those are for the larger profile jigs that I'm going to throw. Now I will also throw. Get out of here. I'll also throw a smaller profile jig. So I don't know if you can see, if you can tell the difference or not, but this jig is a little bit smaller profile. I've trimmed the skirt down to the hook, turn of the hook, as well as I have a lot smaller trailer on here. This is the Power Team Lures Craw de Vour. That's how you say it. It's a 3.5-inch trailer. I'd show you one up close, but for those of you who are familiar with Power Team Lures, the Hog Tonic scent is absolutely pungent, and I don't really feel like having that on my fingers for the rest of the night. The jig that I use is the VMC Adrenaline Flippin' Jig. Now the reason I use this jig is it's kind of I feel like, and it works for me this way, it's kind of a two jigs in one. The way the head design is, let's see if you can see that. The way the head design is, it's got this flat spot right here that allows that jig to sit perfectly flat on the bottom, almost like a football jig. And the way that nose is pointed right there, the way it's flattened off right there, it allows you to actually drag this jig like you would a football jig, and it's not going to fall over. So if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it, maybe I'll put it on my hand. You can see it, that jig sits with that hook point, that hook sitting directly up in the air, so it allows those craws to the appendages of your trailer to be flapping up in the air as would a defenseless crayfish. That's the jig I use for almost everything. I will throw on a football jig every once in a while. However, I prefer that jig because it has so many uses. I can flip it into cover. I can drag it on rock. I can drag it over a flat. I can do anything. I can hop it and it lands perfectly. It's an absolutely great jig. Comes with a little rattle on it, so it's got one single rattle. They also sell them with two rattles. It's got a nice big hook. Nice big hook with a nice hook keeper on it. Skirts are great. Comes in a ton of colors. Colors I like for the winter are your black and blues or your browns with a little hint of red. I really like this color for a trailer right here. This is the Hot Tamale color from Reaction Innovations. If you can see right there, it's got little red tips on the pinchers. There's a lot of vegetation in the lakes that I fish. Most of the lakes that I fish, I should say, there's a lot of vegetation. So when in vegetation-filled lakes, crawfish are going to tend to be a little more on the reddish side versus the blue or the brown. Well, most crawfish are brown, but they'll have a reddish hint to them in lakes with vegetation. That pretty much covers it for jigs. I feel like I'm missing something on jigs. But yeah, I keep it pretty simple. I like the VMC Adrenaline Flippin' Jig. If not, I'm using a VMC Adrenaline football head jig. I really like those VMC jigs. They have worked really good for me. All right, next thing we're going to go to is the big worm. Now, most people don't throw a big worm. This is your classic Zoom old monster. Most people don't throw a big worm in winter. For some reason, I like to. It's just it's a big meal. It's an appetizing meal for a fish that doesn't want to eat a whole lot, but he just wants to eat one big meal a day or something like that. And it also catches bigger fish. I use that with a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight. I do not peg it. I use a 4/0 or 5/0 VMC heavy gauge hook. These hooks have a little bit of an offset shank, so this hook point is just a hair offset. Allows for easier hookups. I really like that hook, and it's also got the resin on the eye that keeps your line from getting chafed around the eye. It's really nice. So I really like those hooks. That's pretty cut and dry. I'll use a 1/2 ounce weight so that I can keep it on the bottom. I'm usually going to be fishing that if I find a school of fish that's sitting flat on the bottom and I'm not really willing to eat much else. I will use a 3/8 ounce weight if the 1/2 ounce is a little bit too much, but I like to stick to a 1/2 ounce in the winter just so I can easily keep it on the bottom, even in that shallow water. 3/8 is usually my go-to flipping weight. Flipping and pitching weight in the summer, spring, summer, so on and so forth. But 1/2 ounce is my winter weight. That pretty much covers it. That covers it for the big worm. It's a pretty simple setup. Finesse presentations, my least favorite presentation to fish. I'm not very good at it. It's something that I'm definitely going to work on this winter, but it's something that I always have in the boat with me, or in the kayak with me, regardless of where I'm going, when I'm fishing. There's always a Shaky Head or a Dropshot or a Senko or something in there. So the first one we're going to start with is a Shaky Head. This one that I have on right now is a 1/8 ounce Picasso shakedown, teamed up with a Biospawn plasma tail Junebug chartreuse. This will actually be the first time that I've fished these plasma tails. I've had them for a little while, had them for quite a while actually, and just never really fished them. So I'm gonna give them a good effort this next time out and see what they're made of. I know a lot of people have a lot of really good success with them, so I'm gonna give them a shot. But my primary Shaky Head bait is I haven't seen these in stores. I honestly don't even know where I got them. It was just in an old tackle bag. I've got a ton of them. I think I got them at an auction, honestly, when I was living in Washington. I got them at they had a big auction house, bulk fishing gear everywhere. And I think I just bought a big bag of soft plastics, and these were in them. And I've got about 8 bags of a couple different colors, but these are KVD's, the new Perfect Plastic. So this is KVD's Perfect Plastic. See that, all right. KVD's Perfect Plastic. This is your finesse worm. It's got that coffee scent that I really like with the KVD baits. If you notice, I've mentioned a couple Strike King baits throughout here. I really like the coffee scent that's in the Strike King baits, but I also like how soft these baits are. So I mean, they don't last very long. They last 2-3 fish, but they are super soft, and they've got some great colors. It's got this little, you probably won't be able to see it, but it's got like a little split in this tail. So that little split right there creates a cavity, and what that cavity does is it creates an air pocket, which allows that tail of that worm to float. I do fish the Zoom finesse worms, but I've noticed that since they don't have that little pocket right there, the tail doesn't float as good as they do on these KVD Perfect Plastics. Again, I'm going to try to find the link for those ones. I have not seen them on Tackle Warehouse. I have looked. I could be missing them, but if I can find the link, it'll be good for all of us because they're a really great Shaky Head worm. If I'm not using one of those two, I'm probably going to be throwing a Dropshot for a finesse presentation in the wintertime. Spring, summer, fall, I'll usually have a weightless Senko tied on. Yamamoto Senko is what I throw. By the winter time, fish are schooled up. If you find a school of fish, you can usually drop right down on them with a drop shot. So that's usually what I'll have tied on in the winter time. What I have on here is this is a Rains bubbling shaker. It's a Japanese worm. I actually got my first pack of them in the mystery tackle box, and I bought about 5 packs since. I'll show it to you a little closer here once I get that set. Where'd it go? There we go. So, it's the Rains bubbling shaker. It's ribbed throughout, which those little ribs create bubbles. And it's got that little thin, really thin air-filled tail with a little, I don't know what you call that little thing on there. But that also creates little bubbles. So these are great little baits because they draw the fish's attention by creating those bubbles. They've got a weird squid smell to them, which is really nice. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've smelled the, who makes them? The Kitech swim baits. They kind of got that squid smell to them. These kind of have the same thing. As far as drop shot, if I'm not throwing that, I'm going to be throwing this Zoom Z3 Swamp Crawler. These are Zoom's hand pour baits. They're really soft. They got a lot of action. And they got that 3-color pour pattern. This is the bluegill. I really like the bluegill. I really like bluegills, green pumpkins, because by the wintertime, most of the shad are kind of died off. Fish are not really feeding on shad as much, at least around me. I fish that on, depending upon the bottom structure. If I'm fishing in a lot of rocks, I'm going to be using your standard ball for a weight. If I'm fishing, flats, open cover, but my general use one is your cylinder type drop shot weight. This is the one I use the most, even if I'm around rocks. If I'm not around big chunk rocks, or if I'm not getting these snagged up in the rocks, I'm going to be throwing this. If I'm starting to get snagged up in the rocks, that's the main time I'll put the ball on. I've had that on I don't have one. Move some of these real quick. I'll pull that hook out for you. I fish my drop shot. There's a lot of wood cover around the lakes that I fish, so I fish my drop shot weedless, and I fish it on a 2/0 VMC grip pin hook. I'm sorry, this is a Mustad grip pin hook. This is a 2/0 Mustad grip pin hook. It's a nice little thin wire hook, so you don't have to put a whole lot of hook set power into it to get the hook driven home, and it's a perfect little size for a drop shot for these baits that I fish. Let's see, drop shot. I think that's it for the drop shot. Like I said, I'm not overly comfortable with the finesse presentations. It's something that I'm working on, and something that I will definitely keep you all posted on once I get better at it. But right now, those are the 2 that I'm going with, and those are the 2 that I got rigged up for my trip this weekend. So that is the conclusion of what I'm taking fishing with me. What I take fishing with me in the winter. It's not necessarily a top 5 baits, because it may change midwinter if the fish aren't relating to any of the stuff that I'm throwing. But the stuff that you can almost bank on to work no matter where you're at in the country is your jig, your spinnerbait or your chatterbait, and your jig, your spinnerbait, chatterbait, and your shaky head. I mean, if you take those 3 with you, you should be able to catch the fish. Another one, I'll just add this in there, is your jerkbait. Jerkbait's another good one. I'm not comfortable with it yet, but it's definitely a staple throughout the country. So those are my top 7 or 8 baits that I'm going to be taking fishing with me this winter. Keep an eye out for the next video. I know you haven't seen videos from me in a while. I haven't been fishing in a little while, and when I have been, it has been very slow since the last time I was out. I did qualify for the Kayak Bass Fishing National Championship in October. So I will be fishing, hopefully be fishing that March of next year with a couple of buddies of mine. They also qualified. We just recently started a little kayak fishing group out here in Virginia Beach called Fin Freaks Virginia, Fin Freaks VA. I'll leave the link to to our YouTube channel down here in the description, and I'll also leave the link to all the members of the fishing team. I'll leave the links to all their YouTube channels as well, so you can check all those guys out. As always, check out Big Country Fishing. Check out Fin Freaks VA on Facebook. Both of them can be found on Facebook. Check out both of them on Instagram. I'll put the links to all the sites down in the description. Thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful to some of you. I know it's a lot of information. It's a lot of stuff that's specific to my area, but a lot of it will also transmit throughout the country. Again, thanks for watching, and see y'all on the water.